It was a Friday night like any other, but Lisa and Tom wanted to make it special. They had heard about a renowned restaurant called Le Manoir des Ombres, located in the heart of the city. It was famous not only for its exquisite food, but also for its mysterious and decadent atmosphere that had intrigued Lisa ever since she heard about the place. They decided it was the perfect occasion for a romantic evening. The rain fell incessantly outside, as if the sky was crying in anticipation of what would happen later. Lisa and Tom arrived at the restaurant, an old dark stone building with Gothic windows that seemed to look into the soul of anyone passing by. A brass plate with gold letters spelled out the name, but it was rusty and barely legible. Still, they moved on. Upon entering, they were greeted by a feeling of suspended time. The inside was as gloomy as the outside, lit only by melted wax candles that cast dancing shadows on the dark wood-paneled walls. The decor had an antique feel, with polished marble tables and chairs upholstered in weathered red velvet. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and dressed in a uniform that looked like something from another era, led them to a table in the far corner of the restaurant. She smiled, but her eyes seemed empty and dark, without a gleam of human warmth. Lisa and Tom sat down, feeling a shiver run down their spines as the waitress placed the menu in front of them. It was a simple menu, printed on aged and worn paper. Lisa chose the salmon, and Tom opted for the steak. When they ordered water, the waitress nodded and walked away, disappearing into the dim light. As they waited for their food, the atmosphere in the restaurant became even stranger. The candles on the walls began to flicker as if they were being blown by an invisible breeze, even though the windows were closed. The soft music playing in the background began to distort into a dissonant melody, creating an uneasy feeling. The other customers in the restaurant were few, but they all seemed equally uncomfortable. A couple at the next table whispered nervously, and a lone man at the counter seemed absorbed in his dark thoughts. Finally, the waitress returned with the plates, balancing them gracefully on a silver tray. Lisa and Tom noticed something terribly wrong as soon as the food was placed in front of them. Lisa's salmon was covered in a dark, slimy substance that appeared to be oozing onto the plate, while Tom's steak had a disgusting appearance, as if it were raw, poorly prepared meat. Alarmed, they called the waitress, who returned with her sinister smile. Lisa pointed to the plates and said, "There's something wrong with our food?" The waitress tilted her head and replied in a soft, enigmatic voice, "Ah, you guys chose the house specialty. Don't worry, it's a unique experience." Lisa and Tom exchanged glances, unsure of what to do next. The waitress walked away again, leaving them with the strange food. Afraid of causing a scene, they decided to give the meal a chance and grab their cutlery. To their surprise, the food tasted incredibly delicious despite its repulsive appearance. The salmon melted in your mouth with complex flavors, and the steak, although raw, seemed to melt in its juiciness. As they ate, they noticed that the other customers in the restaurant were also devouring their strange meals with enthusiasm, as if they were under some kind of spell. Time seemed to have lost all meaning as they enjoyed the surreal meal. As they finished, the atmosphere in the restaurant became even stranger. The other customers began to mumble incomprehensible words, and suddenly, all eyes turned to Lisa and Tom. A voice whispered in their ears, telling them to leave the restaurant immediately. Frightened and confused, they hurriedly got up, left money on the table, and headed for the exit. When they opened the door, a deep darkness enveloped them, and for a moment it seemed as if they were in a nightmare. Then, they woke up outside the restaurant, with the sound of rain hitting their faces. Lisa and Tom looked back, seeing the dark windows of Le Manoir des Ombres. They exchanged looks full of doubt and perplexity, unable to understand what had happened that night. Why was the food so strange, and why did the other diners seem so disturbed? The mystery of Le Manoir des Ombres would remain with them, a terrifying experience that defied explanation and left them with a permanent feeling of unease. Lisa and Tom remained outside Le Manoir des Ombres, breathless and confused. The rain continued to fall, dripping onto their faces and mixing with the tears that were beginning to flow from Lisa's eyes. They felt as if they had escaped a nightmare, but the memory of the macabre restaurant was still fresh in their minds. "What the hell happened in there?" muttered Tom, looking at Lisa with concern. She shook her head, unable to find the words to describe what they experienced. "I don't know, Tom. That was strange, disturbing. He held her hand firmly and said, "Let's go home, honey. Let's forget about this and try to understand later." Agreeing, they walked away from Le Manoir des Ombres and got into his car. The rain continued to fall, now heavier than ever, as if the sky itself was crying for them. As they drove home, Lisa and Tom couldn't help but discuss what happened. The food in the restaurant was inexplicably delicious despite its disgusting appearance. And the other customers seemed hypnotized, as if they were under some kind of spell. "Did you notice how all the other customers were acting?" Lisa asked, looking at Tom. He nodded. Yes, it was strange. It seemed like they were all in a trance, like they couldn't resist the food. Lisa sighed. And that waitress. She looked so out of place, so sinister. Tom nodded again. There was something wrong with her for sure. I don't think I'll ever want to go back to that place. Arriving home, they sat in the living room, trying to process the terrifying experience they had. Lisa took out her cell phone and started researching Le Manoir des Ombres on the internet. He discovered that the restaurant had been famous for many years, but had closed after a series of unexplained incidents. The reports were vague and full of rumors, but they all mentioned something strange going on inside. Tom got up and started making them a cup of tea. While they waited, Lisa continued reading the reports online. Some said the restaurant was cursed, others spoke of supernatural encounters and strange visions. "This is unbelievable," Lisa muttered, looking at her cell phone screen. Tom returned with the cups of tea and sat down next to her. "What did you find?" She explained the stories she was reading, all full of mystery and horror. "It's as if the restaurant is connected to something far beyond our understanding, Tom. Maybe we better forget all that." Tom nodded, but his expression remained worried. "But that food, Lisa, it was so strange. How could something so disgusting taste so incredible?" They drank their tea in silence, trying to ignore the lingering feeling that something was wrong with that night. The mystery of Le Manoir des Ombres would continue to torment them, an inexplicable experience that left them with a permanent feeling of unrest. As the rain continued to fall outside, they huddled together on the couch, feeling vulnerable amid the shadows of the night. The memory of the macabre dinner at the restaurant would haunt their minds for a long time, and they had no idea what they had unleashed upon crossing that gloomy door. The days following the experience at Le Manoir des Ombres were filled with a lingering feeling of discomfort. Lisa and Tom tried to move on with their normal lives, but they couldn't stop thinking about the macabre restaurant and everything that happened inside. They shared their stories with a few close friends, but most seemed skeptical, finding it hard to believe the bizarre turn their night had taken. Still, Lisa and Tom knew that something strange and inexplicable had happened there, and they weren't about to ignore it. Tom began researching more about the restaurant and its background. He found some old reports from customers who had visited Le Manoir des Ombres before its closure. The reports were vague, but all mentioned a feeling of oppression and strangeness, as well as the delicious but repulsive food. One night, while Tom was immersed in his research, Lisa received an unexpected email. It was from an anonymous sender, and the subject line read, "What did you see at Le Manoir des Ombres?" Intrigued, she opened the email and found just a single line of text. "You don't know the truth." Lisa showed Tom the email, and they agreed that it was very strange. Who could have sent that message, and what did she mean by the truth? They decided to pay the restaurant a visit again. Not for dinner, but to try to get answers. That night, the sky was clear and starry, a notable contrast to the rain the first time they visited the Le Manoir des Ombres. When they arrived, the restaurant was dark and silent. There was no sign of the sinister waitress or any customers. Tom tried to open the door, but it was locked. They knocked, but no one answered. Lisa looked at the windows, but they were all closed and dark. They decided to go around and check the surroundings of the restaurant. As they walked through the narrow, shadowy alleys that surrounded the building, Lisa had the feeling that she was being watched. She looked over her shoulder, but saw no one. Tom was also uneasy. "That's strange, Lisa. The restaurant is completely deserted." Suddenly, they heard a sound coming from one of the restaurant's windows. It was a soft whisper, barely audible but clearly human. They approached and looked out the window, seeing a shadowy figure inside the restaurant. It was the waitress. She was standing in the center of the restaurant, holding a lit candle. His eyes were fixed on an antique mirror on the wall. She whispered unintelligible words, a strange and ancient language that sent shivers down Lisa and Tom's spines. Scared and curious, they watched as the waitress continued her sinister ritual. Suddenly, the surface of the mirror began to shake and distort. Lisa and Tom saw images of pale, disfigured faces emerging from the mirror, looking directly at them. Terror gripped them as they realized they were trapped outside, unable to move. The specters seemed to be approaching the window, reaching out pale hands toward them. The waitress glanced in Lisa and Tom's direction, and her eyes glittered with dark mischief. With all their strength, Lisa and Tom tried to retreat, but it was as if they were trapped in a nightmare. It was then that Lisa remembered the anonymous message, "You don't know the truth." It was as if the truth was unfolding before them, and it was terrifying. Desperate, they began reciting an ancient invocation they found in their research into the restaurant. The words came out of their mouths in a desperate whisper, and suddenly, the waitress and the specters retreated with an anguished cry. Lisa and Tom ran away, without looking back. The waitress and the spirits seemed helpless in the face of the reverse summoning, and they managed to escape the nightmare they had encountered at Le Manoir des Ombres. At dawn, the mansion was empty, and the restaurant was closed once again. They shared their story with authorities, but Le Manoir des Ombres would remain a dark memory in their lives. The truth was that the restaurant was a cult den, and they had inadvertently unleashed supernatural forces on that fateful night. The mystery of Le Manoir des Ombres would remain with them forever, a terrifying experience that would leave them with a permanent feeling of unrest. Lisa and Tom managed to escape that terrifying night at Le Manoir des Ombres, but the horror of the experience would continue to haunt his thoughts and nightmares for a long time. Although they shared their story with authorities, there was no official investigation of the restaurant or the sinister activities they witnessed. The search for answers consumed them, and they spent hours researching the restaurant, the cult that operated there, and the supernatural forces they had witnessed. They discovered that the cult had a long history of occult activities and mysterious practices, all centered on Le Manoir des Ombres. Tom and Lisa continued to receive anonymous messages, all cryptic and sinister. The messages seemed to know more than they should about their lives and their search for answers. They began to feel like they were being watched, that someone or something was monitoring every step they took. One night, while they were immersed in their computers, researching the cult and activities of Le Manoir des Ombres, Lisa found a disturbing video. It was a home recording of a previous visit to the restaurant, showing customers who had a similar experience to theirs. The video showed the flickering candles on the walls, the sinister waitress, and the terrifying visions in the antique mirror. At the end of the video, the customers also recited the reverse invocation that Lisa and Tom used to escape. The video ended abruptly, and Lisa and Tom wondered who had made it. They continued to dig for information, delving deeper and deeper into the mystery surrounding Le Manoir des Ombres. They discovered that the cult was linked to a series of unexplained disappearances that had occurred over the years. Customers who visited the restaurant and were never seen again. Each discovery led them deeper into the abyss of mystery, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were approaching something terrible and unimaginable. Their nights became filled with nightmares and insomnia, while their everyday lives were consumed by the obsessive search for answers. One night, while they were engrossed in their research, the light in their apartment began to flicker. Lisa and Tom looked at each other in alarm, knowing there was no storm or electrical problem. It was as if something was trying to communicate with them. Then, Lisa's voice came from her computer, whispering incomprehensible words. They looked at the screen and saw a shadowy, distorted, faceless figure. It was the waitress at Le Manoir des Ombres, but now his appearance was even more sinister and grotesque. The shadowy figure began to speak with a voice that seemed to come from beyond death. You defied the cult and revealed secrets that should not have been discovered. Now, you are marked. Lisa and Tom tried to turn off the computer, but it was as if they were trapped in a digital trap. The shadowy figure continued to speak, revealing horrific details about the cult's activities and the supernatural forces they had summoned. Desperate, Lisa and Tom recited the reverse invocation they had learned. The shadowy figure writhed in pain, emitting a piercing scream that resounded throughout the apartment. Then it disappeared from the computer screen. With their hearts pounding, Lisa and Tom turned off the computer and looked around the apartment. The feeling of oppression and terror had disappeared, but the threat of the cult and its sinister activities remained. They knew they needed to take precautions and stay one step ahead of whatever was behind them. The search for answers would continue, but now they faced a hidden and implacable enemy who was determined to keep their secrets at any cost. The truth about Le Manoir des Ombres was darker and scarier than they had ever imagined, and they were determined to discover what was behind the inexplicable mystery, even if it led them to face the unknown with courage and determination.